Hi, my name is Elena Morgan. I'm 52 years old, and until last summer, I thought my life was over. Not in the dramatic way, but in that quiet, soul-dulling kind of way you don't even notice until you're already numb. I live in a small suburb just outside Savannah, Georgia. You know, the kind of place white shutters, trimmed hedges. Everyone waves, but nobody really sees you. I was the wife who baked the cobbler for church potlucks, the neighbor who sent Christmas cards early, the woman people said had it all together. But for years, I was quietly unraveling. My husband Mark is a good man, honest, predictable. He fixes leaky faucets, rotates the tires, himself keeps his shirts pressed and his opinions even-keeled. We've been married 28 years, and for most of them, I told myself that the absence of passion was just part of growing older. That ache I sometimes felt at night, I smothered it with routine, with decaf tea and reruns and gratitude journals. Because women like me, we don't crave anything. We're supposed to be content. Then he moved in across the street. His name was Isaiah Ward. He bought the old Clarkson place, the brick house with the chipped blue shutters, the one that had sat vacant for months collecting dust and rumors. I noticed him right away, not because he was flashy or loud. No, Isaiah had presence. Tall, wide-shouldered, with skin the color of roasted chestnuts, and a walk that told the world he didn't apologize for taking up space. The first time I saw him, he was outside under the blazing July sun, washing his truck shirtless. Water shimmered off his chest as if the heat bowed down just to watch him work. I told myself I wasn't looking, just curious, neighborly. But my hand stayed frozen on the mailbox lid long after I'd opened it. Empty. Just like always. That night I couldn't sleep. I lay next to Mark in our quiet, dark bedroom, staring at the ceiling fan spin. The sheets felt too cool, too clean. And when I finally closed my eyes, the image that came wasn't of my husband's steady hands or his kind eyes. It was Isaiah, that curve of his back, the way his shoulders glistened in the light, and the way for just a second, when he looked up and saw me standing there on my porch, he smiled. Like he knew. The next day, I baked banana bread. Told myself I was being neighborly. Welcome to the neighborhood and all that. I walked it over, hands shaking harder than I expected. When he opened the door wearing nothing but jeans and a crooked grin, I forgot my rehearsed lines. "Well, hello there," he said, voice like velvet bourbon. "Hi, I live across the street," I managed. "Elaine." He took the plate with one hand, his fingers brushing mine. "Isaiah," he said. "Pleasure's all mine." It was just banana bread, just a smile, just two strangers standing a little too close in the Georgia heat. And yet when I turned to leave, I felt something stir deep in my gut, something I hadn't felt in years. Not lust, not even longing. It was danger, the dangerous knowing that something had cracked open inside me, and that once it started, there'd be no putting it back. After that banana bread visit, I told myself to stop. Stop looking, stop wondering, stop imagining. But life has a funny way of tempting you when you're already cracked open. Every time I stepped outside, taking out the trash, trimming the hedges, walking my old beagle Jasper, there he was, Isaiah. Always shirtless, always working on something. His truck, his lawn, his body. And me, I became the queen of excuses. The garden suddenly needed constant watering. The mailbox required checking 3 times a day. And when I wasn't outside, I was by the window pretending not to glance over, pretending I wasn't hoping to catch a glimpse. It wasn't just his looks. It was the way he moved. Like every muscle knew exactly what it was doing. The way he carried silence without awkwardness. The way his eyes lingered just long enough to make my breath hitch, then looked away like a gentleman playing a dangerous game. I caught myself dressing differently. Lighter dresses. Lip gloss I hadn't touched in years. At first I told myself it was just for me, reclaiming something. But deep down I knew better. One afternoon, late August, the Georgia sun boiling the sidewalks, I stepped outside in a yellow sundress that clung to my skin like melted butter. I didn't even know where I was going, maybe nowhere at all. But as if on cue, Isaiah was there hosing down his driveway. He waved and I waved back, heart pounding harder than it had on my wedding day. "You trying to get heat stroke, Ms. Morgan?" he called, grinning. "It's Elaine," I said, stepping a little closer. Elaine, he repeated, like it tasted good in his mouth. Thought I'd take Jasper for a walk, but he had other plans, I said, gesturing back at my snoozing hound. Isaiah laughed, and it hit me low in my belly. Can't blame him. Even the breeze is too tired to blow today. I took a step closer, then another. We were only feet apart now, and something electric danced in the space between us. Want some lemonade? He asked suddenly, nodding towards his porch. Made it fresh. I hesitated. Every cell in my body screamed yes, but something in my chest tightened. Sure, I said, voice soft shaky. We sat under the awning, two mismatched chairs and a little table between us. The lemonade was tart and cold, and I could barely taste it. I was too aware of the way his arm brushed the back of his chair, too aware of the way his gaze never quite left mine. I hope you don't mind me saying, Isaiah said, his tone dropping low and smooth, but you don't seem like most folks around here. I blinked. How's that? He smiled slow and knowing. They all pretend. You look like you remember what it means to feel something. I nearly dropped my glass. The truth was, I did remember. I just hadn't let myself feel anything in so long I forgot what it cost to admit it. I stood too quickly. Thank you for the lemonade, I mumbled. I should get back. He didn't stop me, just nodded, that same soft smile playing on his lips. Anytime, Elaine. As I crossed the street, I could feel his eyes on my back. I didn't turn around. I didn't need to. That night, lying beside Mark, I barely slept. Every shift of the sheets felt foreign. Every breath he took beside me reminded me that I was living a life I no longer recognized. And in the dark, my fingers curled against the memory of a voice, a smile, a man who saw through my quiet pretending. The days blurred after that. I kept telling myself I was imagining things, that nothing had happened, that a smile on a porch and a glass of lemonade didn't mean anything. But that lie wore thin fast, because the more I tried to pull back, the more the universe conspired to push us together. Twice a week, we passed each other at the grocery store. Once, he offered to carry my bags when he saw me struggling with a sack of dog food. I said yes. Of course I said yes. Another time, he helped me wrangle Jasper when the leash slipped through my fingers. His hand brushed mine as he handed it back, and it stayed there just a beat too long. I could still feel the shape of his touch long after I got home. But it wasn't until the storm rolled in that everything truly changed. It was one of those late summer southern storms that roll through like a tantrum wind, whipping the trees sideways, thunder cracking like it's angry with the sky itself. The power flickered out right after dinner. Mark was away for a conference 2 states over. I was alone. I stood at the kitchen sink watching the rain slash sideways across the windows, and then a knock at the door made me jump. It was Isaiah. He stood there soaked to the bone, a flashlight in one hand and that crooked smile on his lips. Just checking in, he said. Thought you might need a little light. My breath caught. He looked like something out of a dream or a warning. I'm okay, I said, stepping back. But thank you. You sure, he said gently. Storm's only getting worse. I hesitated, and then stepped aside. He walked in slowly, his boots leaving damp prints on the tile. I offered him a towel, my hands shaking. He dried his arms, pulled off the soaked t-shirt, revealing every hard line, every inch of him sculpted by years of quiet labor. I tried not to stare. I failed. He caught my eyes and didn't look away. You cold? He asked, stepping just a little closer. No, I whispered, but I was lying. I was freezing from fear, from desire, from the realization that every choice I had made until this moment had led me here. And still I didn't move. I shouldn't be here, he said, voice rough. I know, I answered. And yet neither of us stepped back. The silence stretched between us like a tightrope. I could feel it pulling, threatening to snap. His hand brushed my cheek like barely a whisper. My breath caught in my throat. Tell me to go, he said, eyes dark and steady. I should have. But instead I reached for him. 1 heartbeat, 2, and then his mouth found mine. It wasn't soft, it wasn't careful. It was years of quiet hunger crashing through a dam. It was a woman who had forgotten what it meant to want, and a man who didn't ask for permission to exist. We stumbled back into the kitchen, lips never parting, hands greedy, urgent. The flashlight clattered to the floor, casting shadows across the cabinets. His hands gripped my waist, mine tangled in his hair, the storm outside roaring louder with every second. And just as his hands slipped beneath the hem of my blouse, the lights flickered back on. The world snapped into focus, and there we were, illuminated, exposed. Both of us frozen, breathing hard, standing at the edge of a line we could never uncross. We didn't speak for a moment. The kitchen hummed with the sudden return of electricity. The storm still raged outside, but inside everything felt still. Too still. Isaiah stepped back first, his chest rising and falling like he'd just come up for air. "I should go," he said. I didn't answer, couldn't. He picked up the flashlight from the floor and handed it to me. His fingers brushed mine, but there was no smile this time. Just that unspoken thing between us, heavy, alive, dangerous. The door closed behind him with a soft click. I stood there for a long time, hand pressed to my lips like I could somehow shove the moment back into the past where it couldn't follow me. But it did. It followed me to bed that night, where I lay wide awake next to a phone that never lit up with a text from Mark. It followed me into the next morning, where I burned the eggs and dropped my coffee cup. It followed me into church that Sunday, where I sat beside the same women I'd prayed with for years, wondering if they could smell the sin on my skin. And still I didn't stop. I told myself it was a one-time thing, that nothing truly happened, that a kiss didn't count. But my body knew better. My hands remembered. My breath still caught when I saw him shirtless on his front porch, pretending to sweep away leaves that weren't even there. And then just like that, we stopped pretending. It started in the late afternoons when Mark was still at work, and the neighborhood was quiet. I'd bake something, he'd text something, and suddenly, I'd find myself across the street, the back door swinging open like it had been waiting for me all along. Sometimes we didn't even speak. Sometimes it was just heat and silence and breathless touches in shadowed corners of his house. Other times it was laughter, low and warm, like it belonged in another life. A life where I wasn't married, a life where I didn't hate myself after. But I did. Every time I crossed the street back home, I hated myself a little more. And yet I kept going, because when he touched me, I felt seen, not useful, not reliable, not a wife or a hostess or a name on a checkbook, just a woman, with hunger, with fire. One day, I came home to find Mark waiting for me on the porch holding 2 coffees. "Thought I'd surprise you," he said, smiling. "You've been so tired lately." My stomach flipped. "Thanks," I said, taking the cup. My hands were still trembling. He reached out and brushed a leaf from my shoulder. "You okay?" I nodded too quickly. "Yeah, just allergies." He nodded, satisfied, kissed my cheek, told me dinner would be his treat tonight. And I stood there, coffee going cold in my hand, guilt curdling in my chest like spoiled milk. But here's the thing, they never tell you about betrayal once you've opened the door. It doesn't close easily. Especially when what's on the other side makes you feel more alive than you ever thought possible. The next week, I found myself pressed up against the wall in Isaiah's hallway, his lips on my neck, his voice thick with heat. "You always come back," he whispered. I should have said no, should have pulled away. But instead I looked him dead in the eyes and said what I didn't even realize was true until the moment the words left my mouth. "I don't want to stop." The thing about wanting something that isn't yours, eventually it starts wanting something else. Isaiah and I didn't just burn, we consumed. Mornings, afternoons, stolen hours between grocery runs and charity meetings. Every glance was loaded, every touch was fire. But fire doesn't stay warm, it either dies or destroys. It was a Thursday morning when I first noticed the change. He didn't kiss me like he usually did. His mind was somewhere else, eyes flickering to his phone more than to my body. I asked if something was wrong, and he just shook his head, pulled me close, and mumbled, "Just tired." I didn't push. But the next time, he didn't answer my text at all. The one after that, he showed up late, smelling like cologne I didn't recognize, with a bite mark on his neck he claimed came from sleeping funny. I'm not proud of what I did next, but I waited. Late one night, long after Mark was asleep and the neighborhood had gone still, I turned off my headlights and followed Isaiah's truck out of our cul-de-sac. I kept a distance, heart pounding so hard I felt it in my teeth. He drove out past the highway, down a back road, lined with motels and shuttered gas stations. He turned into the lot of a cheap motor inn, parked behind the building, killed his lights. And then she stepped out. She was young, maybe 30. Skin like honey long legs in denim shorts, laughter bubbling up from her throat as she wrapped her arms around him. He pulled her in like it was the most natural thing in the world. Like he hadn't just left my bed 2 nights ago. I didn't cry. Not there, not then. I just sat in my car, hands clenched so tight around the steering wheel my knuckles turned bone white. I watched them kiss, deep and slow and familiar, like he was using the same script he used on me. And something inside me, something small and foolish, snapped. The next morning, he texted like nothing had happened. "You around?" I didn't reply. He called, twice, left a message about missing me, said he was thinking about last time. I deleted it. But I wasn't done, because I remembered something he didn't: the mortgage, the joint card, the account that he'd convinced me to open under my name. Just for travel, he'd said. Easier to manage receipts. Receipts? God help me, I opened that account and started reading. Thousands of dollars, hotel bookings, designer shoes, lingerie I'd never seen, and charges in cities I'd never been. It wasn't just me. I was a resource, a launch pad. He'd used me to fund his side projects, his new life. And worse, I let him. But not anymore. I waited until the weekend, until Mark left for his brother's lake house. I dressed in black slacks and a blazer I hadn't worn since my banking days. Hair neat, makeup sharp. I walked into that bank with a stack of documents and a smile that didn't reach my eyes. "I need to freeze an account," I told the woman at the desk, "and close a few others, all in my name." And when I got home, I changed the locks, filed the fraud paperwork, transferred every last cent into a new account under my maiden name. The next day, Isaiah showed up banging on my front door like the world owed him something. "Elaine, what the hell is this?" I opened the door just enough to let him see my face, calm, clean, untouchable. "It's over," I said. His jaw twitched. "You can't do this." "I already did." He stepped back stunned. "You think you're the first?" "No," I said, smiling thin, "but I'm sure as hell the last." And then I closed the door. And this time, I locked it from the inside. The days after Isaiah left were strangely quiet. No more texts. No more knocks at the door. No more glances across the street that made my stomach twist. It was just silence. Mark came home Sunday evening, arms sunburned and full of lake house stories. I listened, nodded, smiled in the right places. And when he kissed my cheek and thanked me for keeping the house so peaceful, I nearly laughed. If only he knew what had burned down while he was gone. I didn't tell him. Not that week. Not the week after. Maybe someday I will, maybe I won't. Because what I learned wasn't about Isaiah or even Mark. It was about me. About the version of myself I'd buried beneath routines and Sunday casseroles and polite little lies. The woman I thought I had to be. The one who never wanted too much. Never reached too far. Never questioned why she stopped feeling alive sometime around year 15 of her marriage. Isaiah didn't give me that woman back. He reminded me she still existed. And then he showed me why I needed to protect her. The old part of me, the one that once thought she needed a man to feel whole, wanted to stay angry. Wanted to burn it all down. But the woman I became, she chose something else. Peace. Real peace. The kind that doesn't come from secrets or sparks or stolen moments, but from standing in your own skin and not apologizing for the fire you carry. I started small. I took a weekend trip by myself to Asheville, ate alone at a rooftop bar, let the wind tangle my hair and the silence stretch as long as it wanted. I signed up for a ceramics class. Messy, imperfect quiet. My hands learning how to shape something that didn't have to be useful, just real. And I stopped sleeping with my phone under my pillow. Mark noticed. He asked questions. I gave quiet answers. One night I said, "I think I need space." He blinked, stunned. From what? From pretending. He didn't argue, just nodded slow and heavy like a man trying to swallow something sharp. Now the house is a little emptier but a little lighter too. Mark and I are figuring things out at a distance. No yelling, no courtrooms, just space, time, truth. And Isaiah, he moved out a few months later. The house across the street sat empty again, like it had never been touched, like no fire had ever raged there. Sometimes I catch myself watching that house, remembering, not the man, but the moment, the heat, the danger, the awakening. And I remind myself not all awakenings are gentle. Some crack you open with flame and force, some leave scars. But even scars mean you survived. So if you're listening to this, wondering if you're too old to feel something real again, too far gone to change, too trapped to breathe, you're not. Sometimes losing what you thought you needed is the only way to find who you were always meant to be. Thank you for staying with me through this story. If it touched you, if it made you think about your own fire, don't forget to leave a comment and subscribe. Because we've all got a story, and sometimes telling it is the first step toward healing.